Welcome, TLC family. Have you ever met someone who talks a lot? I remember when my younger brother Jonathan was a baby, he really, for a while, didn't speak. And we took him to the doctor one day and found out that he was tongue-tied. And so the doctor clipped it and, loosened his tongue. And since then, he just was a talker. We called him a blabberhead, right? He would just talk to anyone who would listen. And now, I've known many people like that. My father-in-law, Breck Sr., he can talk to anybody for a long time. And even my own son Noah, he's definitely, a friendly, talkative guy. And that's not a bad thing, right? I actually kind of envy them in some way because they easily converse with people, that they don't really know. I'm a little bit more shy when it comes to conversational stuff. But they are talkers. Now, when it comes to God, though, a lot of people think that God is this stoic, solemn, very quiet, very serious person. But really, God is a talker. God is speaking. He loves to speak to his children. He loves to give us direction. He loves to show us, things that are coming in the future, give us, correct us if we're going the wrong way. God is a talker. He is always speaking. Now you might say, well, Pastor Shauna, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever heard God speak to me. Most of the time, we just don't understand that, hey, that's him. He's speaking to you. He's always there trying to show you things. And a lot of times we just think that it was us, right? Oh, that was just my idea. Or, or we just don't pay attention, or we don't take time to listen and ask him. But I tell you what, guys, a big part, an exciting part for me of walking in the Spirit, and that is our series, right? We're talking about walking in the Spirit, denying the flesh, disciplining this body, and just plugging into what God has for us to do. A big exciting part of that is hearing the voice of God, listening for his direction. And I love to teach on this topic, and because, I feel like this is so important and something that most Christians just kind of gloss over, and they don't really understand how easy it is to hear from God. And so that's what we want to talk about today. God is a talker. And so there's so many instances in the Bible where God is speaking. I'm just going to remind you of the very beginning when Adam and Eve were first created. We know that God would come in the cool of the day and walk with them in the garden and talk to them. That was a tradition, like a regular thing that happened every day. And we know that because when Adam and Eve sinned and they fell, then God came looking for them in the cool of the day, like he was used to, ready for his conversation, and they were hiding, right? Because that relationship was broken. But from the very beginning, you can see God setting this precedent that he wanted to be involved in man's life. He wanted to be, speaking to them and conversing and having this relationship. And I tell you what, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He has not changed. He didn't stop talking because, it's so many thousands of years later. No, he still wants to have a relationship with us. And so there's so many instances in the Bible. Obviously, we can't cover all of them. I thought a good place to start would be the book of Acts, because we've been reading that together as a church. Every week we have our chapter that we listen to through audio Bible and we meditate on it. And so, we've been familiar with the book of Acts. So I'm going to start there and give some examples, because I want you to see, what kinds of things does God like to say? And as we become more sensitive and kind of on the lookout for when he's speaking to us, it's going to become more and more clear in your life. I want you guys to have this, open, active relationship where you're conversing with Father God on a daily basis. That would be my desire for you. And so let's look at some examples here. I'm going to start in Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5, verse 17. And so it says, "And then the high priest rose up and all those who were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and they were filled with indignation, and they laid their hands on the apostles and put them in the common prison. But at night an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them out and said, "Go stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life." Now, this is some interesting action here. The early church, they're already being persecuted because the religious leaders are like, who are these people? You know, they're talking about Jesus all the time. Jesus had already been crucified, buried, rose from the dead, ascended, and went back into heaven. And now the apostles, the disciples, are spreading the good news. They're preaching the gospel. And so it's making some waves. It's making some people upset. So they put them in prison. But what happens? God breaks them out. God breaks them out of prison, sends an angel to open up the prison doors, walks them out, and then gives them specific instructions, right? What did he tell them to do? Go stand in the temple and speak to the people all the words of this life. Told them where to go, told them what kind of things to say. And so there's some very specific direction that the Spirit of God spoke to these apostles in a rough time in their lives. I'm sure it wasn't comfortable to be arrested, right? Maybe they were even, roughed up a little bit in the process. But God cared enough about them to break them out and speak specific directions to encourage them to keep going. I wonder, after you've been arrested, you might think, should I keep preaching? That didn't go so well. So God gave them very clear, specific directions. Let's go on to Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8, verse 26. We've got an angel showing up in this one too. It says, "Now an angel of the Lord spoke to Philip, saying," specific directions here, "Arise and go toward the south along the road which goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is desert." So he arose and went. Thankfully, Philip obeyed, right? Like, can you imagine? He's like, "No, I don't want to go to the desert today. Sorry, God." No, he heard the directions and he went. It was that simple, right? Okay. So he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians, who had charge of all her treasury and had come to Jerusalem to worship, was returning. And sitting in his chariot, he was reading Isaiah the prophet. Then the Spirit said to Philip, "Go near and overtake this chariot." So Philip ran to him and heard him reading the prophet Isaiah and said, "Do you understand what you're reading?" So let's kind of recap what's going on here. So the angel of the Lord appears and says, "Philip, go out here to the desert." Philip goes. This a very important man from Ethiopia, right, was driving down the road in his chariot. And then the Holy Spirit prompts Philip and gives him more instructions. So notice he got specific instructions of where to go. He obeyed. In that obedience, in that place, then he got further instructions, right? I heard Brother Hagin, a minister who started the Bible school that Pastor Luke and I went to, he would tell us, if you ever feel like you're not sure what to do, go back and make sure you did the last thing that God told you to do, right? Because some of us are like, "Okay, no, I don't really want to do that. Tell me something else, Lord." And he's like, "No, I'm still waiting on this other thing that you need to take care of," right? So go back and do the last thing that God spoke to you. And then that's where you're going to get further instructions, right? That's where Philip got them. So once he obeyed the first instructions, then the Spirit of God said, "Okay, go near to this chariot, talk to this guy," right? And so Philip, again in obedience, just ran up and said, "Hey, do you understand what you're reading?" And the guy's like, if you read the rest of the story, actually, no. And so Philip is able to use that opportunity to preach Jesus to him. This guy accepts Jesus and is baptized right there. And so these are the kinds of things we're looking for. What kinds of things does God want to speak to us? Well, we've already seen two examples of very specific direction. So let's keep going. Acts chapter 9 now, verses 4 through 6. Now, it says, "Then he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, 'Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?' Now, let me give you some context, because this is the Apostle Paul, who started a lot of churches in that time, and wrote a bunch of the epistles that are still in our Bible today. Before that, though, his name was Saul, and he was persecuting the church. He actually was hunting down Christians to kill them. And so God really stops him in his tracks here and speaks to him. Now notice, Saul at this time, was in disobedience. Does God still care about those who've made mistakes? Maybe have messed up, maybe are living in sin or disobedience right now? Well, God cared enough about Saul to talk to him right here, to really correct him and set him straight, right? And so God says to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, who are you, Lord? It's like he knew, but he wanted confirmation, right? Okay, I know it's you, Lord, but can you tell me anyways that it's really you? It's kind of funny, right? And so, who are you, Lord? And then the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. And so the Lord just so lovingly corrects him and says, hey, what you're doing, you're reaching out, you're persecuting the church, you're actually persecuting me. Saul, you're messing up. I know you're zealous for me. You know a lot of the scriptures in that, but you're persecuting me. Now, what happens next? How does Saul respond? So he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what do you want me to do? Then the Lord said to him, arise and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. And so, again, I love this because you see the Lord bringing correction, right? And he didn't come and say, Saul, you're just such a horrible person and you don't deserve to be in my presence or anything like that. I feel like a lot of Christians, they would expect that, right? They would expect condemnation and, fear and all of this, but really the Lord is merciful. He's so good. He's too good to us, right? And so he shows up, he's merciful. He corrects Saul, says, hey, what you're doing, it's not right. You're persecuting me when you're persecuting my church. And thankfully, Saul responded, right? He responded to that loving correction and said, what do you want me to do, Lord? And then what happened? And the Lord gave him specific instructions. Arise, go to the city, and await further instructions. So he's given him step by step what to do, right? So good. So good. So then God sends Saul into the city, right, to await instructions. Well, then the Spirit of God goes and speaks to another man about Saul, and his name was Ananias. In Acts 9, verse 10. It says, now there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and to him the Lord said in a vision, Ananias? And he said, here I am, Lord. So obviously he was familiar with the voice of God too. He's like, hey, I'm right here, Lord. What do you need? So the Lord said to him, arise and go to the street called Straight, and inquire at the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus, for behold, he is praying. And in a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him so that he might receive his sight. Because Saul was struck blind when God was talking to him. Then Ananias said, Lord, I've heard from many about this man, how much harm he's done to your saints in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priests to bind all who call in your name. But the Lord said to him, go. For he's a chosen vessel of mine to bear my name before Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. Look at this whole conversation that God and Ananias are having back and forth, right? First of all, intro, hello, Ananias. He says, here I am, Lord. What do you need? And God gives him very specific instructions. Go here, talk to Saul. He's expecting you because this is what I told him. Ananias is a little scared, right? He's like, are you sure, Lord? Because I heard this guy was killing Christians. So you want me, a Christian, to go speak to him. Are you sure about that? And God's like, no, go ahead. It's okay. Go ahead and do it. And so, long story short, Ananias goes to Saul, lays his hands on him. He receives his sight again. He's born again, receives really his commission for ministry at that point. And so thank God, again, thank God Ananias was obedient. He could have said, no, I'm a little too afraid right now, Lord. I don't think I can follow your directions. No. He put that aside and followed the direction of the Lord. And so, guys, these are only just a few examples, right? I have way too many, obviously, to show you, but only just a few examples of the Spirit of God speaking. God is a talker. He wants to talk to you. He wants to give you direction. He wants to lovingly correct you and help prune those things out of your life that are not productive, that are holding you back. He wants to show you things to come in the future. And so as we go through this journey, as we walk in the Spirit, I want you just to become more sensitive to the voice of God because He's talking to you today. Have a blessed day.